goal of the spotlight on us is to, this segment, this part of the open meeting, is to differentiate and demonstrate credibility. Like, this guy Peter knows what he's talking about, right? So how can we do that, right? There's a lot of ways to do it. I think there are some more typical ways and there are some more simple ways that we could focus on. And I want to run through those right now. I'll be honest about this. I think that there is no one best way, and you can do almost anything when it comes to this part of the open. As long as you have a good emotional blueprint and you close for data, you can do anything here. You can talk about any aspect of what we do. If it demonstrates enough credibility for them to say, Shelley really knows what she's doing, I have faith in her and the possibility of her solving our problems. That's a success, right? So here are examples of ways to do that. But this is not the exhaustive list by any means. One, there's the age-old what's your number conversation. Basically what we're doing here is offering a little critical breakdown of the difference between needs-based planning versus what we do versus what we'll call macro planning. So I'm demonstrating a thorough knowledge of the industry and what most of the industry's offerings look like. I'm demonstrating that I have critical thinking capabilities to understand what is good and bad about what most of the industry does, and therefore we have arrived at a conclusion which says this is a better way to do it, and this is what we offer our clients. Here's all the ways that it's better. Right? Here's some examples of how we do it. For example, as we lead into this conversation around the what's your number, and we won't role play the whole thing at this moment, but typically this is what my whiteboard looks like at the end of the conversation. We've drawn out our formula here of what's your number. I made them guess. They couldn't come up with the answer. 500. Where'd that number come from, right? So usually it's I don't know or it's some specific number. Either way, we're going to work back to the fact they have no idea. It was a guess. How does the rest of the industry handle that? They kind of help you guess, and then they solve this future value calculation of money times time times a rate of return, equals X, equals that number. All of it based on a guess. I'm asking the client, what are the problems that you see with this? So we've got a list of problems out here based on a guess, uses linear math, relies on a rate of return, pushes people to take more risk because it's so reliant on a rate of return. It ignores the unexpected events in life and assumes that you'll have a best case trip through your accumulation years, which no one does, right? Something always happens to everybody at some point during that journey. It minimizes protection. It ignores the truth of cash flow, which is that savings is more important than rate of return. This whole host of problems with this approach, this needs-based approach to retirement planning. What this can lead us to is a couple other discussions. One, it can lead us to a discussion about how we would do it differently, right? And so I like to transition into that by talking about the idea of this being the crystal ball. And the traditional planner out there is taught to, it's not his fault, he's not a bad guy, but he's taught to help you predict the future and then plan accordingly by working your way backwards mathematically. And what we're saying is we can't predict the future, right? The future is unpredictable. But it's not okay to fail. It's not okay to fail. And therefore, we need to plan accordingly, right? So you see the subtle difference there? One, the future is predictable, so let's plan accordingly. We're saying the future is unpredictable. Let's plan accordingly. How would we do that? So we know if we can't know what the future looks like, but it's still not okay to fail, what we have to do is own the present. When it comes to planning, let's own present. Let's understand exactly how your world looks today from a financial resources standpoint, and let's make sure that it is running as optimally as possible. Are you as financially fit as you can possibly be? Financial fitness, I think, is a phrase that goes a long way in an open meeting. And the way that we do that is what? How do we deal with this unknown future and help people plan accordingly without guessing? Focus on the present. So what, like literally, practically, if they ask the question, well, how do you do that, Peter? What do we actually do?
We organize your finances and protect everything.
Beautiful. And then we focus, right? So let's put those two ideas together. So the way that we do that is by getting you organized. This is what I'm going to introduce, if we haven't already, the living balance sheet. Assets, liabilities, what you own, what you owe, subtract one from the other, you get net worth. We can't stop there because financial fitness includes the movement of cash flow. Where is the money going? Where is it not going? How is money getting on and off that balance sheet? And then the last measure of financial fitness would be how well positioned are you to deal with loss? Right? Like, what does your financial immune system look like? My immune system's not doing very well right now. What does their financial immune system look like? That is really the key to success, owning the present, understanding what it all looks like, and making sure that they are saving enough money, that they're fully protected, that they're eliminating debt, they're putting money in the right places, and they have things like liquidity and flexibility built into their balance sheet. We find that if we can do those things and we follow some basic rules that time has told us hold true, you'll be as well positioned as possible for whatever the future may hold. So maybe that's a story I want to tell in the open meeting. And I find that especially, I find it to be true, especially for younger people who are maybe less than 45, that is really what appeals to them. Because they feel disorganized. They feel like maybe they've lost some time, but they still have some time left if they can just right this ship. So let's get in shape. All right, let's get a financial exercise regime together, and this is how we're going to put that blueprint to paper. So that's an easy way to transition from the needs-based planning conversation to what we do. Right, the LBS story, I guess, is really, from a label standpoint, the way to think about this. I don't know who we're calling right now, but I'm about to set an open meeting. Too bad they hung up. All right. Good. Okay. The other way, or another way, that I can really transition into a key differentiator or a credibility demonstrator from this what's your number conversation is to talk about what not is wrong about this picture, but what is omitted from this picture, which is, of course, what happens after age 65, after whenever that retirement date is. You know, nobody out there talks to our clients about what's going to happen from a distribution planning standpoint. Really, what we found, I don't know if anybody read the article. I know Jeannie sent it to maybe the crowd in Charlotte over the weekend. That tells us that almost nobody even talks to our clients about accumulation planning. I think I still have it up here. Here we go. So what this article told us was that 64% of all, we'll call them wirehouse advisors, think that say that they provide holistic planning. So only 2/3 will even say, right, that they provide holistic planning. Of those, only 1/3 actually do any sort of holistic planning at all, meaning they do something other than just sell investment products. And of that third that actually does it, based on the study, we know that almost 100% of them are doing needs-based, accumulation-oriented planning. And I would say the extent of the distribution planning that they do is positioning an annuity. So for that third that actually does, according to this study, actually does, in quotation marks, holistic planning, really what that means is that that person has sold an insurance-based product or two. Because that's how our industry, so bad, right? That's how our industry actually defines holistic, as they did insurance investments. So they sold somebody an equity index annuity, and now they're a holistic planner. We know that's usually the extent of it for the third that actually do what we're talking about. So we've got to be able to do better. And part of the way we can demonstrate our capability here is opening up this conversation about distribution planning. It's the question of how are you going to turn those assets that we're accumulating here on the balance sheet, how are we going to turn them into a force that is able to generate streams of income, is able to be the thing that generates cash flow when you don't generate cash flow anymore, for as long as you might live in retirement, regardless of what the market's going to do, regardless of how long you live, regardless of interest rates, regardless of whether or not you get sick along the way. Has anybody ever talked to you about a strategy around that phase of your life from 65 to whenever? And I would be surprised if you ever talked to somebody who said, yes, I got a plan for that. Right? So good. We're just, again, we're not hitting them over the head with it. We're not closing on that. We're just suggesting that it's something we have a high level of expertise in, and we're suggesting the possibility that maybe it's something they'd be interested in. We'll close for it later. Right? First, I want to eventually here get into the emotional blueprint where if that's a problem for them, then it's really going to come up. I don't want to dwell on it because, it may not be an issue for them. the 45-year-old may not care yet. He or she is still so far away from that phase in their life. That's why the emotional blueprint is a better connector, a better tool to get us to where we need to be in this open meeting. A few other ways that we can differentiate and demonstrate credibility. And I think you should have all these in your toolbox. Master one at a time, but have all these in your toolbox because you never know who you're going to be sitting in front of, right? You're never going to know what that defense looks like, and so you don't necessarily know what play to run yet. All the more reason why you need to have lots of plays in the playbook. So another one would be the macro micro advisor. Especially when they have questions about what you do, or they're worried about the guy that they have in their world, the other advisor, the brother-in-law, the college buddy, the whoever it is. I find this talk can be especially powerful to define who you are in a way that's different from the other advisor that they've met with before, and also relieve the worry and the tension in the room. You're going to replace that individual, right? So I want the takeaway from this to be, I'm only going to replace that individual if you think they deserve it. So either way, it was their decision, and they can always say, please don't. So the simple story here is just this, that when someone starts their working years, they accumulate a number of different advisors: insurance people, auto, homeowners, an investment advisor, an attorney, a CPA, a mortgage broker, a realtor, somebody at HR, at work, a banker who lends them money perhaps for other things, or they just have their savings accounts with. And the client here is in the middle, and they have to be the general contractor who deals with all these different professionals, sorts out the advice and the services that they provide, and comes up with a consensus, a strategy on how to manage it all efficiently, which is a pretty difficult thing to ask the average person to do. This full-time job is something entirely different, right? Clearly, from the article, it's a lot to ask even a financial advisor to do. So how could we expect the general public to be any good at doing it on their own? Rare is the client who feels comfortable navigating all that. So part of the service we provide is we're saying, hey, we want to get in the middle here with you, right? With me and with Consolidated Planning, what we're going to be able to provide is almost like a lens to filter the advice and the services of all those other advisors, all those other entities, and make sure that it's all coordinated efficiently, there's no conflicts, it's working as best as it possibly can so that you don't waste a single dollar of your hard-earned income. That's the micro-macro story. The final thought there is that, let's say that we've got the investment person, we've got the life person, we've got the disability person, and so on. What we're not saying is that we have to replace those people. We're willing to do work that will complement those people, even though in some cases we could wear the hat of some of these individuals. We're licensed in those areas. Because we do it all, we know we're going to find opportunities to help you where we don't have to conflict with what they do. In fact, hopefully we'll just enhance what they do. So the theme here, I guess the takeaway to put them at ease is not replace. Right, we're not going to replace those relationships, but we want to enhance them. Right? And again, if they get replaced, it'll only be because the client decided they needed to be replaced, and that often happens. But that was their idea, right? It wasn't something we forced them into. They recognized through the course of our process that maybe that person wasn't as credible or trustworthy or even as likable as they thought they were, right? So there's another opportunity. In general, I would say other areas to dwell on. I think just cash flow. While we did address it when we told the LBS story, I think for certain clients, we can go a little deeper and talk about our cash flow expertise. Talk about the fact that in this model, it's almost a version of the macro-micro in a way. They have an advisor here. They have advisors here. They're insurance people. They've got advisors here. They've got their mortgage broker and their CPA and all that good stuff. They have no one who looks at cash flow. They've got no one who actually, that's their role, that's their job, that's their area of expertise, is to dive in and make sure the cash flow is working efficiently. And that's really where we separate ourselves, because we do that like no one else. That's where the whole conversation starts and ends for us. Why is that so important? Why do we feel like our process should be structured that way? Think about what keeps your client up at night. I guarantee you it's not their mortgage. In terms of the structure of their mortgage, it's the payment for their mortgage, because that's a cash flow item. It's not their 401k. It's not what the 401k did in the market last week. It's how much income is the 401k going to create at the end of the day. It's maybe how much can I afford to contribute, because that's a cash flow consideration. So in accumulation, if we think about our timeline versus distribution, cash flow is the king, and in distribution, cash flow is the king. It is the thing that anybody ever cares about when it comes to their money. I guarantee you they really only think about these other things. They worry and stress about these other things to the extent that it has to deal with cash flow. Like, what makes somebody go out and buy life insurance when they have children? Worry about somebody else's cash flow. That's what it's all about. So isn't that interesting? I find just a few minutes spent on that and just unrolling the amazing fact that other advisors don't ever talk about cash flow gets you past that tipping point where now that prospect is leaning across the table and they're like, wow, this is something I didn't expect to hear today. This is something different. So that's an opportunity. Cash flow expertise. Everybody, I don't care where they are on the timeline, everybody deserves to have that conversation. Everybody potentially could have that appeal to them. A last thought is just in general, any opportunity we can show that we offer critical thinking in the open versus just dealing with the conventional wisdom is a potential win for us. It's an easy way to demonstrate some credibility really fast right out of the gate and have them say, I can't wait to see what Dan's going to say in the next meeting. I would really appreciate Dan's input on this financial problem I'm facing. So what's an example of planning topic where we can pretty easily demonstrate a little critical thinking that has us maybe conflicting with the conventional wisdom that most people follow blindly? What's an example?
Rate of return.
Beautiful. So the idea that, what finished the thought there, Peter? You're right?
Yeah, that people will move toward take more risk to get a high rate of return to manage the distribution of retirement, whereas savings is a much more important factor.
Beautiful. So savings is the much more important factor. Savings more important than rate of return when it comes to building wealth for retirement and otherwise. Beautiful. There's an opportunity. I think people look at that and they're like, I've always felt like that was probably true, but the industry never allowed me to really connect those dots, right? Because they all are selling this. What's another easy story to tell around that?
You realize how taxable you're, by finance.
Beautiful. Let's talk about taxes, right? So let's start that conversation with the question of, do you think we're in a high or low income tax environment right now? Right? Let's have that conversation. Let's pull up old LBS here. If we're still logged in, we'll go to a sample client. And let's go to that third-party room. So many of the things that revolve around critical thinking, the backdrop for that conversation is here in the tools, financial analysis, third-party section of the toolbox here. Because these are all facts. Right? So we're talking about, we have thought critically about some facts, and we've drawn a conclusion that is 180 degrees away from what the rest of the industry does. So taxes are the lowest that they've ever been, by and large, with a few exceptions, for the highest income earners and the lowest income earners. There's this whole host of reasons we could probably agree on why taxes might be higher in the future. And yet, the blanket advice of our industry, the blanket advice without any thought, is to defer taxes wherever possible. Defer first, do everything else later. Isn't that interesting? So we feel like diversification should play a role here, and there's a real risk in deferring taxes. I mean, anytime you have a choice, there's always a risk that you're making the wrong one. So deferral is a choice, and we feel like we should have tax diversification, just like we should have diversification among asset classes. So maybe it doesn't make sense to put all of your eggs in the tax deferred basket. Maybe we should think about some alternatives. Good. So that is a way I find you have that conversation with somebody who's a high income, good saver, has, without thinking about it, put all their money in that basket, and maybe we've got something to talk about. Anything else you can think of? There are others. They escape me at the moment. I think those are the two biggest ones, right? Without a doubt. So you've got, between these, I don't think any of these is a terribly difficult conversation to have. You don't need a master's degree in finance. You don't even need a bachelor's degree, right, in finance. I don't have one. So all you need is a little bit of preparation. All you need is a little bit of practice. And this is the part of the meeting where you can seem very likable if you're prepared because you get to be yourself. So learn one of these at a time, master one of them at a time, and it will make it easier for you to master the next one.